Do you have a specific time of day you usually work out? And is there a certain meal that you'll have on a regular basis before you go to the gym?
I currently work out in the morning. I like to get it out of the way. I just feel I'm more focused mentally when I can get in there in the morning. By the end of the day, so much has gone on that it's brain fatigue, and really people think they're tired at night, even though they haven't done much activity during the day. But psychologically speaking, the fatigue is mental. That's why when I do have clients that train at night and they say they're a little tired, come home, take a shower, have a little bit of food, maybe some fruit or something, and maybe they need a pre-workout. But it's generally mental fatigue, not physical fatigue. And if you can get over that hump, then training at night's fine. When you train doesn't really matter as long as you consistently train at that time. You'll over time you'll adapt to it and perform just as well, whether it be morning or night. I train in the morning, and I try and get a big breakfast in about 2 hours before training is my goal. And all my meals kind of look the same. It's usually a lean protein source like top sirloin steak or egg white blends, some fat-free Greek yogurt. I'm probably getting in 50 plus grams of protein at each of 4 meals a day. It's 50 to 60 grams of protein. Um, and then it's generally low in fat. The fats are already in the eggs, are already in the lean meats. I don't need to add any additional fats to the meal. And then after that, I'm chasing, as mentioned, potassium-rich carbs first. I like to get my dose of fiber for the day, so I might throw in a little bit of oatmeal in the morning and a potato. And then if I have to increase my calories, I'm just throwing rice down because I can consume a lot of it and it'll digest quickly, and I'll be able to eat my next meal again. The difference between a 3,000 calorie diet and a 4,000 calorie diet for the same individual. The 3,000 calorie diet is going to include sufficient protein and sufficient fats for health. Well, now, if you need 4,000 calories to grow or to fuel your workload, if you're a 2 a day CrossFitter or a football player, the difference between those two diets is 3 cups of rice. That's the difference. And you can add 1 cup to each of 3 meals, and there your problem solved. And I actually like to, for the weight gainers, back to the skinny kids, I sprinkle a little bit of dextrose on the rice if it's a separate serving that I'm purposely eating to drive my calories up into a surplus. And the dextrose isn't to drive calories; it's just to increase amylase and saliva, so that it's just, again, mechanically speaking, either easier and faster to chew and swallow that food and more palatable. And it's kind of like sushi is sugar rice. I don't think people realize that, but they can eat a lot of it and they're hungry an hour later, and that's because it's sugar rice, and it's generally lower in fat, depending on what you use as the protein source in it. But so that's one of the strategies that I utilize in the foods that I commonly eat. I'll also have a cup of milk or yogurt, and I'll have orange juice because it's, again, less satiating. There's a lot of good research behind orange juice, and people don't realize they demonize it like Coca-Cola, but they're very different. And there's plenty of good studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals to show that it does not elevate uric acid. It actually decreases AST and ALT. It decreases LDL. I'm not talking about drinking a gallon of orange juice, but I've been promoting drinking 3 or 4 ounces with each of a few meals daily for the health benefits. The polyphenols seem to have a great health benefit as well. So I throw all that research into my ebook as well. I talked about this 5 years ago in my Iceland seminar when I was presenting up at Hafthor Bjornsson's gym, and people just went ape shit. They went crazy. You're just drinking sugar, and they just don't understand the research. It's pretty clear. As long as it doesn't cause you to edge your way into a calorie surplus and you're overweight trying to lose weight, that's fine. I would choose fruits. I would choose blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, oranges, long before I'd choose juice for those people, because liquid calories are just simpler to overconsume. But there's a place for it for the thin athlete that's trying to gain weight.
How do you feel about protein powders? And if you're a fan, are you somebody that likes to bring one of those shaker bottles and have some during the workout or right after the workout? Or how do you feel about all that?
It's food in a can. I don't want to knock it, but that's all it is. And again, not as satiating as protein from lean food sources, not as micronutrient dense in terms of iron and B12 and zinc and creatine and creatinine and all those things that you find in a piece of top sirloin steak. I've always had a hard time gaining and maintaining body weight on liquid on purely shakes. Jay Cutler talked about this some many years ago as well. And just just from experience, I hate to throw my anecdotes onto this conversation, but between that and testimonials from many clients I've worked with over the years, they may serve a purpose in a meal that is insufficient in protein, but they're no better than food. And I would argue that there's some shortcomings as compared to food. Now, in these low calorie, like type 2 diabetic triage situations, where you need to get in and get them to lose a lot of weight quickly, we see that liquid diets are very effective. Like an 800 calorie liquid diet within 7 to 10 days can have a significant impact on reducing HA1C and lowering liver fat. If a 7% weight loss can resolve 95% of fatty liver, and a 15% weight loss can potentially restore beta cell function, in which case you can, type 2 diabetics may become not be able to not be insulin dependent, not have to use exogenous insulin prescriptions. Not everyone. If you've been type 2 diabetic for a long time, that beta cell function may be reluctant to restore. But that's just some facts regarding, again, I don't want to shit on powders because there's a place for them. And it just depends on who you are and what they're being used for. They're not magic. They don't improve your performance anything greater than a similar amount of protein from a meal, but they might just be more convenient. They taste good.
And if somebody is going to include those as part of the routine, is there a certain one you recommend over others? Because nowadays, there's just so many different plant-based ones. You have your classic whey protein. How do you feel about the different varieties?
I got to defer to the experts on that. And I'm a big believer in animal proteins, but when Stu Phillips' lab has done a lot of work and there's been a lot of research out of McMaster University up in Canada. Stu does a lot of research up there on protein and muscle mass. And there are some vegan protein powders, blends in particular, that provide sufficient leucine to give you a hypertrophy response, sufficient muscle protein synthesis. So I've got to be cautious. Just because it's not something that I consume or recommend doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work just as well. I would usually recommend the whey isolate, and that's just because for digestibility, some people may have trouble with the casein proteins or just the straight whey, which would be a blend of casein. That might cause some digestive distress. So that's kind of where I start with, and it's reasonably affordable and well tolerated by most people.
Earlier, you talked about the protein bolus throughout the day, and I can't recall if you were talking about conventional, weightlifting wisdom or if this was your recommendation, but let's get into this. Let's talk about timing of that protein, whether it be through food or through a drink like we're talking about here. How critical is it to get that within a certain time around your workout, or is it more just within the day?
Within the day is the single most important factor, getting a daily total of protein in. And again, somewhere around 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is, so about 0.8 per pound for athletes trying to optimize performance in particular, or retain lean mass in a diet. Although if the training stimulus is significant enough, even a half a gram of protein per pound of body weight has shown equivalent lean mass retention, although the higher protein did show a little bit more lean mass gain. But those people were exhausted at the end of the trial, because you have to train really darn hard in order not to lose muscle tissue in a calorie deficit, particularly when you're on lower protein. So the protein for the day is most important. Secondary to that would be what's the frequency, and particularly if you're training. We'd like to see you get some protein in within a couple hours before and within a couple hours after, kind of a 5-hour span of training to optimize the training stimulus and to I think maximize the benefit. And again, just if you're a 200-pound athlete, you need 160 grams of protein. It's pretty hard to eat that in one meal, is what it kind of comes down to. And pretty hard to eat that in 2 meals. 80 grams of protein, not that hard. Maybe if you're adding a supplement or, but you could get there. But 3 meals, pretty easy to meet that. And so Again, the ISSN suggests that 3 to 4 evenly spaced feedings, they lean towards 4, is probably optimal. This kind of gets down to, on the hierarchy of most important to least important. It gets down there with meal timing. It's not inconsequential, but it's not the primary driver of results. But so I would say 3 to 4 feedings a day on average. And whether or not you fit those into a particular time window, that's fine. You could, even in a 16/8, you could get 3 meals in that 16/8, an 8-hour time span or thereabouts, each having 50 grams of protein, and satisfactorily meet your protein requirements. And as you train harder and harder and gain more and more muscle, you may need uh, more protein throughout the day, and that could be harder to do in fewer feedings. So I think that's generally where the science lies on that.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Oranges are very high on the satiety index, as are potatoes. To be honest, boiled potatoes I have in all of my weight loss clients' diets because they're really high on the satiety index. Carbohydrates don't need to be demonized. The reason I like them, if we're having this discussion about athletes, is because